Are you looking for a cool gift for your grandchildren that will not get broken? Fall victim to being a fad gift? Of course you are. Be the coolest grandpa ever. Narrate a children's ebook in your own voice and send it to your grandchild. They will be able to read along on their tablet or mobile device as the story comes to life with the sound of your own voice. Recording a book on makemementos.com allows you to create a truly personalized gift. By recording a specially chosen book for your grandchild, you can create something that will last a lifetime. Anytime they want to hear your voice, all the grandchildren need to do is play back the recording. Take it from me, creating a recorded book on Make Mementos is super easy. You simply select the book you want to record, and then start recording your voice reading the book to your grandchild. Best of all, you can start out the book by recording a short 30-second video introduction. This is a fun way to say hello before you start reading your book. If you mess up recording one of the pages, don't worry about it. You can always re-record a page until you're satisfied. It only takes a few minutes to record, but you're creating a memory that will last a lifetime. Best of all, your recording can be passed down and shared with future generations. To start the process of recording your own family keepsake, go to makemementos.com/pages/thecoolgrandpa and get started today. If you missed the link, I will have it posted in the show notes and in the affiliate section of my website.
Do you also find it difficult to build up a meaningful relationship with your grandchildren at a distance? As a long-distance aunt to a 2-year-old in Australia, I wanted to create solutions for the millions of family members who cannot be physically together all the time. This is why I created Peekabond, an app that helps you to connect with young children at a distance. The app works with the following 3 steps. First, we give playful activities suggestions that are based on your child's development stage. These suggestions are science-based and gamified. Secondly, you can create a private family circle. And finally, we'll let you send videos back and forth so you don't have to be live at the same time, and save them in one spot for your grandchild to watch. We've got over 120 content suggestions. You can build a love bank for your grandchildren. And if you go to the Cool Grandpa website and look for the affiliate links, sign up for a newsletter with a lot of inspiring content, or you can try the app for free.
Hey, I'm so glad to have you here this week to listen into this great conversation that I'm having with DeeDee Moore from the More Than Grand website and blog and shop and resources, all sorts of things that DeeDee's involved in. It's fantastic. And before we get started, I do want to remind you that I do have a Buy Me a Coffee account. Now, for those that don't know, Buy Me a Coffee is a great way that you can support the show by coming in and providing a one-time donation. If you want to support us, please go to buymeacoffee.com/coolgrandpa.com, and that will take you right to the site. You can go in there and log your support, and then that would be a great way to help offset the cost of this podcast. DeeDee and I are sitting down and having a conversation that's really around this idea of how we react to people providing us with resources or books on subjects. I don't want to spoil too much, but we get into this conversation because sometimes as parents, as grandparents, people might say, hey, here's a great book about X, or here's a great video about this. And initially that can be viewed as a little bit of a, maybe not a full-on attack, but viewed as like, hey, there's something wrong with you. And that's not the case at all. But DeeDee and I have a great conversation around this whole concept. And DeeDee does a great job of helping talk about a resource that she's put together to help grandparents and parents navigate the holidays. So you'll be sure to want to stick to the end of this conversation and then be able to check out these resources on morethangrand.com. Without further ado, let's jump into the conversation. Hello and welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is your host, Greg Payne, coming at you from Studio 12. This podcast is about being the best possible grandpa you can be, focusing on what it is to be a grandpa and how we can all share that experience together for our grandchildren. Hi, DeeDee. Welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast again. I'm excited for us to sit down for another conversation. And this subject that you're going to bring up is something that really got my juices going as far as figuring out how both of us can help move things forward. So I'll let you introduce yourself and the subject.
Greg, it's great to be back. I'm DeeDee Moore. I run the website morethangrand.com, which has a blog and all sorts of resources for grandparents who want to up their grandparenting game. I especially focus on new grandparents. So that's that, if you're a new grandparent, that is a great place to start. But you and I talked about this subject after I had a dinner with my husband and another couple who I'll call Jack and Jill. And they are also grandparents. And we were having a great time, nice conversation. And Jack said to me, "So how's your website going?" And I said, I gave him a little update on what was going on with it. And then I said, there's a book that I think you would really appreciate. And I started telling him about the book, and his wife jumped in and said, "Oh, Jack is an amazing grandfather. He doesn't need a book." And I was so taken aback by this that I couldn't even respond. I mean, I don't have any idea what I mumbled before changing the subject. But then I couldn't stop thinking about what I wish I had said, because I think it gets to the heart of why so many grandparents don't look for ways to be better at grandparenting. In almost any other aspect of our life, we look for opportunities to grow and learn. If we enjoy something or if it's important to us, we almost always look for a way to enhance that or to improve the experience. We go to training and develop new skills in the workplace so we can advance. We look to experts for advice on parenting. We invest in better equipment to improve our golf game. We watch YouTube videos to learn new makeup techniques. We buy cookbooks to expand our cooking skills. But most grandparents assume that their enthusiasm and love is all they need to be a grandparent. And they aren't wrong, it's plenty. But learning about grandparenting can make the experience so much richer, and it can help you have a more meaningful impact on your grandchild. It can improve your relationship with your grandchild's parents. And it can help you enjoy it more, which actually improves your mental health. So what I'd love to do is figure out how we can get more grandparents to understand how much richer the experience could be if they tried to look for more resources on how to do it.
Sure. Well, and this is one of the things where I'm talking to people about the podcast and where my numbers are. And, I fall in the comparison trap because there's podcasts out there with hundreds of thousands of downloads. And then we're talking about grandparents and things. And that's not controversial. It's not, real crime. It's not political hot talk. It's not, it's a little bit of, hey, this is some stuff where we can take the good things that you're doing and you can listen in on some stories and you can pick and choose and find little tidbits that can just enhance what's already going on. And if you are struggling, whether it's a relationship with your adult children or a relationship with grandchildren, then there's people that have been there, done that before and have found a way to navigate. And maybe they've got some answers for you that you haven't been able to just come up with on your own. No fault of your own. It's just, hey, you know what you know.
Exactly. Well, and the other thing that I found is that a lot of grandparents are doing things that really bother parents and not realizing it. Often the adult children don't want to say anything. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to, they're used to being the one that does whatever the grandparent says. And so they don't bring it up. They just kind of are resentful of whatever that may be, whether it's, grandparents buying too many things or whatever it is. It's hard for grandparents to see what they are, those missteps that they're making until they become real issues. So that's one of the things that I try to do on my website is help present the parents' point of view on a lot of issues and help educate grandparents on the things that are important to parents.
Oh, absolutely. One of the resources that you have is a guide for new grandparents that I
Yeah.
think goes through some of this because, sometimes we need that third party involved. So we get an understanding where it's not emotional, right? Because those relationships become very emotional. You've got a brand new grandson, granddaughter, and you're wanting to jump into that relationship. And some parents need a breath and they don't
Absolutely.
need grandparents come charging in with all the love and enthusiasm and everything that's natural. But at the same time, we need somebody to go, hey, grandparents, you need to give them a minute.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The New Grandparent Essentials is the resource you were talking about. And there's a whole section on having a conversation with your children about what they need, what they expect in those first weeks and months of a new baby and how you can help. And it gives you tips on what exact questions to ask and how to ask them. So it's really designed to set you up for success and help make everybody's life a little easier.
Right. And as we were talking, and I was thinking about this subject about why do people have a resistance? In this particular case, we're talking about grandparenting, but a resistance for being open to other books, other courses, other resources about that. And, and I'm coming at this from a grandfather's, primarily a guy's point of view. I did notice that there was a National Institute of Health study back in 2019, and so this is pre-COVID and pandemic and all that, that really it's only about 7% of men receive any kind of mental health treatment and 12% of women, which is low. And I'm not saying that needs to be 100% across the board, but at the same time, I think sometimes thinking about these emotional items such as grandparenting falls very close to the mental health side of things where guys don't want to acknowledge it. And I can get that. And then sometimes we don't know how to get the conversation started. And it becomes awkward when it's like, hey, here's a resource, here's a book. And then the initial reaction is the wall comes up and it's like, what are you saying? I'm a horrible grandparent?
Exactly. I think that may be how my comment was taken by Jack and Jill, which was certainly not my intent at all. And so it's, you're right. There is this reluctance to look for help when we might need it. And that's one of the wonderful things that grandparenting does, especially for men. There are studies that show that men who are involved grandfathers have lower incidence of depression and other mental health difficulties later in life. So, it's worth it to work at that relationship and develop a closeness with your grandchildren.
Part of what I think is starting to happen, and we're involved with a grandparenting group with a number of experts and people that have, whether it's blogs or books or whatnot, and some of our discussions internally have been talking about being at the forefront of a grandparenting movement and a change in vocabulary, a change in how people are talking about being a grandparent. And possibly this is part of that change is asking grandparents, be open to having people share resources with you. And it's not a bad thing. It's a little bit of, if I'm going back in my grandpa, my guy mindset, it's a little bit of, hey, if you're into mountain biking, somebody may have a great video and a DVD about a trail or about techniques or whatever. And you can use that and absorb that into your own mountain biking and become just a little bit better and enjoy it more.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what I said. Almost anything else that we enjoy doing, we look for ways, we look for the new trails. We look for, a yoga class that's at a better time of day. We look for, whatever it is, we look for ways to make it better. But grandparenting, as so far, most grandparents do not look for any help in it. And I think they're missing out because of that, because there are, as you said, there are a number of us that have started collaborating with one another, and the resources and the ideas that are out there are just phenomenal. There's so much to be had.
I want to ask you too is, with a lot of your work on some of the new grandparenting and some of the approach from the adult children and the communication to grandparents, is what are some ideas and what are some of your thoughts about how adult children could even introduce the subject to their parents? Because it is tricky. I mean, it's funny because I can go out and talk to friends respectfully about my wife and maybe some struggles and challenges that we're having. But if I come home with, hey, honey, here's the top 5 things that will fix you, I am going to be sleeping out in the doghouse. And so that's not the right approach. But maybe you've got some ideas about how to introduce some of these things.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I suggest that parents do is send the grandparents to my website, because I will introduce those topics and help them get over those awkward conversations. But I think the important thing for grandparents to remember is that parenting today is way harder because of social media and the internet. Parents now have hundreds, if not thousands, of resources to go to for parenting advice, and they're getting it from all sides. So when grandparents try to add their advice onto what else, everything else that parents are getting, it's just completely overwhelming. And grandparents need to be really cognizant of the fact that parents are getting plenty of advice from other sources. For parents, I think that it's very hard to go to the grandparents and say, I need you to do something different. I'd like you to do this instead. Grandparents, there are interesting studies that show that, and I'm terrible at remembering numbers, but so let's say 50% of parents have asked grandparents to change something that they do. Well, the number of grandparents that actually change that is pretty small. And of the ones that say they're going to change it, half of them still don't. So it is really hard for parents to get grandparents to change. And that's why I've developed the resources I have. One of the things that I offer for the new grandparent essentials is a gift card. So parents can buy a gift card for this resource and give it to grandparents when they find out you're going to be a grandparent. Here's this really cool thing I found for you. It teaches you all about, everything you need to know to be a great grandparent. So that's one of the angles that I've taken.
And I think too that it's kind of been interesting that we don't often complete some of these courses, and we don't often complete going through these things that we buy online. And we were talking, and I've listened to some other podcasts that are entrepreneur based, and they're selling these courses and that course. And even they will lament that if they're selling a course, people that complete those courses is probably 15% or less. And so there's something within us that we've got to also change a little bit of, hey, when we do look at these resources, whether we buy a grandparenting book or a book on being an engaged grandfather, whatever that is really having some of the discipline that we would also tell our kids, but we need to have it as grandparents to be able to sit down and look through the materials. Now, some of the materials, they're going to be things that we know we're already implementing, and that's okay. But there's going to be some hidden gems in there that we can use to enhance those relationships.
Absolutely. And, you talk about those $1,000 courses that people don't finish. That is one reason I made mine fairly compact. So you can get through it in a few hours, and it's not priced at $1,000. So it's definitely affordable, and it's geared towards helping grandparents just get the information they need without a whole lot of it's a time saver. You don't have to search all through the internet to find out everything that's new about baby care these days, or safety or what's new in the parenting world. So I've tried to condense it all and help them save some time.
Well, and that's great, because even though we've come up with the boomers and let's say Gen Xers, it came up reading books and came up and doing this thing. We have also become attention, deficit in many ways. And we can sit back as a generation I'm talking about. We can sit back as this generation and go, oh, these kids have an attention span of a goldfish and all this and that and the other thing. I find myself sometimes listening in on calls and then checking emails and doing, we can call it multitasking. But it's not. And so we do need that condensed material, and we do need those things where it's, I joke to people like, we're seeing books coming in at 100 pages now because publishers know the audience isn't going to read much more than that.
Right.
And
right.
Yeah. And so I think that's absolutely brilliant and a good approach for that. And then it should also assure grandparents that, hey, when you get involved in some of these courses, when you get involved in buying some of these resources, it is, almost bullet point type material that you can easily digest and easily implement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's designed to really just give you the overview of everything you need to know and get it quickly and be ready to start your journey as a grandparent on the right foot. So.
Now, have you noticed any differences between grandfathers and grandmothers in terms of being engaged or open to some of these resources and some of what you have to offer?
Well, it's definitely grandmothers are the ones that are out there. Those are the voices you're hearing. And a lot of the websites and things are geared specifically to grandmothers. That's something that I've really tried to avoid. Everything that I do is for grandparents, whether it's grandmothers or grandfathers. And I do, I'll admit my audience is still probably, my email list is probably 95% women, with the few men out there that are looking for the information themselves. So it's definitely, grandmothers are definitely the ones that are looking for something.
Well, and I've noticed that too with the listenership is I've got quite a few grandmothers and mothers that are listening in. Yeah. And I think that's one of those things where, like I said, the conversation's starting to change. I think openness about looking for resources is starting to change a little bit, but for the males, it's going slower. Yeah. And I think that's the thing we've got to crack. And what I would suggest is that grandfathers that hear this, or adult children with grandfathers in their lives, is, encourage them to come in and look at these resources, and not as a way of, again, we talked about, not as a way of, hey, these will fix you, but as a way of like, hey, there might be some tips and tricks and things that can add to that discussion.
Absolutely. I know one of the best comments I got was a grandmother of 6 who took my course. She was by no means a new grandmother. She had been a grandmother. I think her oldest grandchild was 8 years old, and she took the course and came back to me and she said, I had no idea how much some of the things I've been doing bothered my children until I talked to them about it. And so it really validated to me that conversation is so important. And we can think we're doing a great job, but, until we talk to the kids about it, we're not going to know. Right.
And I really encourage the grandfathers too, because there's a communication style difference typically between men and women. And you can get guys turning wrenches on cars and they'll spill their guts as long as one guy's working on the back end and somebody else is working up front. They'll spill their guts to each other.
Right.
But if you were to sit down on a couch and somebody else on a seat, and they're looking at each other, they're not going to say a whole lot. And
absolutely.
I don't know why. That's a hard wiring thing for a lot of us. So for guys, I almost suggest that, hey, if you want to talk to your daughter-in-law, find a time when you're working around the kitchen together to have these conversations. Maybe not sit down at the kitchen table and stare right at each other, but
right.
when take that same philosophy, work around each other so that the conversation's there, but you don't necessarily have to have that immediate in your face interaction.
Exactly. There's something else to focus on at the same time. That's really helpful.
Grandfathers, if you haven't had those conversations yet, and I almost call it, I go back to my Toastmaster days where we'd have these things called a moment of truth. And meaning like, hey, we need to hear the good and the bad about the club. And, grandpas, you also need to be open to hearing the good and the bad about what you're doing. And bad is just opportunities to get better. It's not
Absolutely
bad in terms of moral shortcomings or anything like
right.
that.
Exactly.
It's more like, hey, I really need you to help us with this behavior issue with this grandchild.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that that's such a good point. It's room for improvement. Who doesn't want to get better at things? When if you're doing something that could be improved, why would you not want to know that? But you're not going to know if you don't ask.
No, absolutely. And, part of when I was looking up some different things around this conversation is it clicked with me. I read a book about Cal Ripken Jr., shortstop for the Baltimore Orioles, Iron Man, all the sorts of records, right? Now, the joke is that he had well over 3,000 hits, that he had 3,000 batting stances. And that's not exactly true, but he did change his stance so often that it would be possible to change up, and he would have a couple of different stances throughout a season. And what he was doing, and where I'm going with this, is just to remember for people that as good as he was,
right.
He was always trying to work to get better. He was hitting off of a tee. He was trying different things. He was listening to experts that would say, elbow up, bring this elbow in. Hey, do this. His famous thing was he would slide the bat back and forth on his shoulder. And he was doing that because he had to learn how to wait on a breaking ball. And so there's all these things. And I look at somebody like Cal Ripken, who's so good at baseball, and yet he changed what he was doing over 100 times. That, hey, I can change. I can improve.
Right.
I'm grandfather of the year material, but I can get better,
Exactly. Yeah, I think professional athletes are an excellent example of how, you can be amazing at something and still practice, look for advice, change things up. So hopefully more grandparents will understand that they can really improve the whole thing if they start looking for some resources and inspiration.
And it does come with, hey, we need everybody to have an open heart, right? And be open to the information coming in. That,
right.
And at the end of the day, I think parents and grandparents, we want to be on the same page and do the best we can for those grandkids.
You are so right.
Now,
you are so right.
DeeDee, is there any, I want to transition topics a little bit, but is there anything about this topic about trying to be open for inspiration and open for ideas that can help improve your relationship that you would like to touch on that maybe I haven't asked you?
Oh, I think you've covered most of it. I just do think that communication is the absolute key to the whole thing. Just like any other relationship, communication is the key. I think a lot of times grandparents are told to just zip it and not say anything if they are concerned about something or wish something were different. I don't think that's necessarily healthy advice. Definitely, you don't want to give advice in the heat of the moment when somebody's struggling with something. But I do think that it's important for grandparents to be able to talk to their adult children about parenting, about family relationships, about the kids, about their role. And so I think that it's really important for parents and grandparents to set up a pattern of healthy communication from the beginning so that they can have those conversations without somebody feeling attacked or, like they're being interfered with.
And I'm going to call out the guys a little bit that, hey, we need to maybe take a look in the mirror and do some adjustment on our side and just be a little bit more open that if somebody comes to you and, hey, this is an issue, take it for what it is. It's not an attack on you. It's not an attack on the love you have for the family and the grandkids. It's, hey, here's an area where I need to see a little bit more support or a little bit of a change, or, hey, what are your ideas about coming at this issue?
Right.
So
absolutely.
Now, DeeDee, I do want to ask you and have you talk a little bit about this holiday resource that you've recently come up with.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what, this came from parents. They, leading up to the holiday season last year, I started seeing these things on social media about how parents were just dreading the holidays and dreading the stress that comes with it, making everybody happy, and so many gifts that grandparents were buying and not listening to them. And so I started talking to these parents and came up with a really great resource for grandparents to help address the things that their adult children were worried about, so that they can have that conversation before the holidays hit and just make the holidays happy for everyone, because they of course are where we make so many of our memories as families. And it's important to go into them with everybody on the same page. So it's called A Grandparent's Guide to Happy Holidays. And it's got, it's a 12-page PDF with advice that from both grandparents and parents to help avoid those hot spots. It's also got a bunch of organizational documents. It's got Excel sheets for meal planning and shopping lists and gift lists and budgeting and getting people to sign up for helping with dinner. So it's just a really great way to streamline your holidays and take some of the stress out of them.
Oh, that's awesome. I love having a planned out kind of activity. Well, one for me, it's a personality thing. I like planning. My wife jokes that I can be spontaneous as long as it's properly planned out. But it does take off so much stress if you're talking about meal planning ahead of time, if you're talking about what the appropriate level of gift giving for grandkids
Absolutely.
is.
And the gifts is the one that parents called out most often. My child's grandparents will not listen to me about gift giving, and they just give us so much stuff. And we don't have room for it. We don't want it. We're trying to have a minimalistic lifestyle, whatever the reasons are. Grandparents are terrible about listening about that. So I've got some advice in there for ways you can curb your enthusiasm. And hopefully it'll help a few people have a better year.
Oh, that's great. And folks, I'm going to put links to this in the show notes. But DeeDee, where can people go to find out more about you and find out more about More Than Grand and your resources?
It's pretty easy. It's morethangrand.com. And you can find all of the resources at morethangrand.com/shop, or go to the link in the show notes.
Oh, perfect. And we will be sure to make sure that this is as easy to get to as possible. And DeeDee, is there anything I haven't asked you that is still on your mind, or something that popped into your head about even the resources that you would like to share?
No, I don't think so. But I do want to let everybody know, if somebody recommends a grandparenting book to you, buy it.
Yeah, it's not that it's being insulting. It's saying, hey, you're an awesome grandparent, and here's some things that might even enhance that relationship a little bit more.
Exactly.
All right. So DeeDee, thank you so much for being on the Cool Grandpa podcast again. And I'll be sure to also put a link to our previous conversation in the show notes as well, so people can listen to that.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Greg. It's been great to be here.
What a fun conversation with DeeDee. I always enjoy talking with her. She always has some great topics and some really good insights. I do want to make sure that you go over to morethangrand.com, check out DeeDee's website, and check out the resources that she has, especially this holidays resource. because it's a really great way to take some of the stress out of the holidays, making sure that just things that have to go on, let's call them the housekeeping parts of the holidays, menus and shopping and all that kind of stuff that, sometimes can cause some friction. She's got a great resource there to help manage that and some great ideas on navigating the holidays with your adult children and your grandchildren. So be sure to go over to morethangrand.com, check out the resources that DeeDee has, and until next time, remember to stay cool. Thank you for listening to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend. That's the best way you can help us to expand our community, as well as get the news out about how valuable grandpas are in the lives of those kids. If you'd like to leave me a comment or shoot me a potential topic for this podcast, please go to www.cool-grandpa.us. Look for the comments tab, fill it out, hit submit. It's as easy as that. Until next time, remember to stay cool.